I finally found the first person who's ever made me feel safe, loved, and truly seen. But now I'm realizing that I might be polyamorous, and that being monogamous with him, the person I love more than anyone in the world, is quietly breaking me. Does that make me selfish? When I first met my partner, one of the very first things he told me, like within days of knowing each other, was that he was polyamorous. It wasn't said as a passing comment or a maybe someday kind of thing. It was just part of who he was, stated openly and comfortably. He had been in a poly relationship before, and from the way he talked about it, I could tell it wasn't just something he did, it was something he was. I remember admiring how confident he was in that identity, how secure he seemed in what he wanted. I've always known deep down that I wasn't strictly monogamous either. But I grew up in a small place, the kind of area where anything that isn't completely traditional gets looked at sideways. So while I felt like I was poly, I never got to explore it, never had a partner who even remotely understood it. Most of my past relationships ended the same way. My partner cheated, I got crushed, and I promised myself I'd never be that naive again. So when he admitted that he liked me, I told him the truth, that I wasn't ready for an open or poly relationship yet. I needed time to work through my insecurities, my fears of being not enough, my need to rebuild trust after being lied to so many times. And he understood. He didn't pressure me, didn't make me feel guilty for needing that. He said we could take things slow, start as monogamous, and only open things up if or when I ever felt ready. A year later, we officially started dating. And since then, we've been together for 2 years. The start of our relationship was blissful, not in the naive, everything is perfect kind of way, but in that calm, stable, safe way I had never felt before. He was patient with me when I spiraled. He never dismissed my emotions. He checked in often, asked what I was comfortable with, and always respected my boundaries. He made me feel like maybe, just maybe, I wasn't broken for wanting love that felt a little different. But we've had our bumps, too. Mainly around his behavior online, texting other women compliments, following a ridiculous amount of girls on social media, just generally giving too much attention where I didn't feel comfortable. It wasn't cheating, exactly, but it triggered all my old insecurities. I'd start wondering, is this how it starts again? Every time we talked it through, and every time he listened, he apologized, made an effort to understand why it hurt, and adjusted his behavior. And honestly, outside of that, he's been the best human being I've ever met. He's so gentle, calm, and endlessly kind. The type of person who listens with his whole heart, who never raises his voice, who looks at you and really sees you. Even his mom once told me that she was startled the first time she heard him raise his voice. Not out of anger, but excitement, because she'd literally never seen him mad. He's constantly helping me with everything, emotionally, mentally, practically. He buys me little things just because, not to show off, but because he genuinely thinks of me. He drives me places, helps me with errands, plans things we can do together, and listens when I ramble about my weirdest thoughts. He never makes me feel small for my feelings or silly for my anxieties. I love spending time with him. There's this effortless peace when we're together, the kind that makes you forget how hard the world can be. We can sit in silence for hours and still feel connected. He's made me laugh until I cried, held me when I broke down, and stayed even when I told him he didn't have to deal with my mess. And maybe the most unexpected thing of all, he's made me believe in marriage. I used to hate the idea. I thought it was just a glorified contract, a way to cage people into something that wasn't meant to be permanent. But with him, the idea doesn't feel like a cage. It feels like home. At the start of this year, I finally felt ready to open up our relationship. It wasn't a spontaneous decision or something I jumped into lightly. It was something we had talked about for over a year, something that had always lingered in the background since the beginning. I wanted to do it right. So I brought up every question, every fear, every possible scenario I could think of. I wanted transparency, mutual understanding, and absolute honesty. He was open to it, at least he said he was. We agreed to ease into it slowly, though maybe we did move a bit faster than what most people would consider slow. But the thing is, both of us wanted this. We both believed in polyamory, and we both trusted each other. I thought that would be enough. At first, it was just conversations, checking in, setting boundaries, and reassuring each other constantly. It felt exciting but also a bit scary. Then I downloaded a few dating apps. Just casual stuff, nothing serious, mostly to see who was out there, and if anyone would click with me. When he found out, he got upset. He told me he didn't like using dating apps himself, that they made him uncomfortable, that he preferred meeting people organically. I understood where he was coming from, but I couldn't help feeling like it was unfair. Just because he didn't like that method didn't mean I couldn't use it. Still, I tried to be patient and empathetic, to explain that this was part of exploring safely and intentionally. When I actually started talking to someone from the app, that's when things really started getting shaky. He was upset again, not because I'd done anything against our rules, but because he felt like it was happening too fast. The funny thing is, he never told me not to. There wasn't a rule saying I had to wait a certain amount of time before forming connections. But his reaction made me pause. I remember telling him so many times that we could just close the relationship again if he wasn't okay with it. I said it over and over. I didn't want to push him into something that would hurt him. But every time, he reassured me that he did want this, that he just struggled with change. He told me that was what was really bothering him. Not jealousy, not insecurity, just the sudden shift in what us looked like. He said he just needed time to adjust. And I believed him. So we continued. I got closer to the person I was talking to. We texted every day. It was lighthearted at first, flirty jokes, shared interests, long late-night talks about everything from music to philosophy. But over time, there was real emotion there. I caught feelings. They did too. Still, I was careful. I made sure to keep my priorities clear. I made time for my boyfriend, never hid anything, and checked in constantly. I wanted everyone involved to feel safe and respected. Eventually, though, it became clear that the emotional weight of this was harder on my boyfriend than he'd expected. He'd swing between being supportive and withdrawn, from saying he was happy for me to saying he didn't know if he could handle it. One day he'd tell me he was proud of us for communicating so well, and the next he'd shut down completely. It was a constant back and forth that left both of us drained and confused. Finally, we had a long, raw, brutally honest talk. He admitted that he didn't actually know how to handle the feelings that came up for him, fear, jealousy, insecurity, but that he wanted to learn. He said he needed to find a healthier way to express those emotions, rather than letting them fester and explode in waves of discomfort. And I admitted that I needed to be better at reassuring him, that I couldn't expect him to just be okay, because he said he was poly. It wasn't about being perfect, it was about being real. For a while after that, things got better. We were more open, more connected. He seemed calmer. I felt lighter. I thought we'd found our rhythm. But then the person I was seeing brought up something I hadn't fully prepared for. They wanted to meet in person. We had been long distance since the start, and while I knew that was always going to be part of the challenge, I hadn't realized how soon it would become a deal breaker for them. They told me, gently but honestly, that if we couldn't meet soon, they wouldn't be comfortable continuing the relationship. Long distance was just too hard for them emotionally. I wanted to go so badly. I'm from a small town where nothing ever happens, and the idea of spending a week in the city sounded like a breath of fresh air for my mind and soul. I had been feeling stuck for so long, and I needed that little escape, not just for the person I was going to see, but for me. I thought it would be good for both my mental health and my confidence. We had already talked about this trip before, so I figured we were on the same page. But when I brought it up again, he freaked out. At first, he said I could go for 2 days, then change it to none, then back to a few days, then none again. It was exhausting, like watching him wrestle with himself in real time. I tried to be patient because I knew he was struggling, but it felt like every decision I made had to go through layers of his fear and guilt. Eventually, he told me he wanted me to go. He said it might be a good way for both of us to find out if this whole being open thing was actually something we could handle. So I went. And honestly, I had an amazing time. It was freeing. The city was alive in ways my small town never is. I saw penguins, which was ridiculous and perfect in its own way. I laughed more than I had in months, and for the first time in a while, I felt like myself. I missed him, of course, but I felt grounded in the idea that we were both doing the work. Then, 2 days into the trip, everything unraveled. We got into an argument over something small, something that probably wouldn't have even mattered if emotions weren't already so raw. But that fight opened a floodgate. He told me he didn't want to do this anymore, that he wanted to close the relationship. Just like that. While I was still at the other person's house, I remember staring at my phone, my chest tightening, thinking, how am I supposed to exist right now? Because no matter what I did, I would be in the wrong. I told him to come pick me up the next morning, because I couldn't think straight. I cried that night, quietly, so I wouldn't wake anyone up. I felt like I had done everything right. I'd been transparent, communicative, and careful, and yet somehow, I was still the bad guy. It took me nearly 2 weeks to cut things off with the person I'd been seeing. Not because I wanted to drag it out, but because I genuinely didn't know how to end it. I felt like I was breaking something that had barely started, and the guilt was crushing. Meanwhile, my boyfriend made me feel terrible the entire time for not ending it immediately. That's when I started realizing something about our dynamic that I hadn't wanted to admit before. He only wanted to be poly when it worked his way. He didn't like dating apps, so we couldn't use them. He didn't like meeting new people in person, so I wasn't allowed to go out to socialize. He didn't want me forming close bonds, but he still wanted to keep the freedom label for himself. It was exhausting, like playing a game where the rules changed every time I started to understand them. The thing is, I'm an incredibly social person. I need human connection to feel alive. I love meeting new people, making friends, learning their stories, feeling like I belong somewhere outside of my own head. But I'm also autistic, and making friends face-to-face doesn't come easily to me. Dating apps are, weirdly, one of the few spaces where I can be my full self without shutting down. They give me time to process conversations and express myself comfortably. But even that, something that genuinely helped me, became a problem because he didn't like it. I still haven't decided what I want to do. Since that whole mess, we've gone back to being monogamous. For a while, it actually felt good again, safe, simple, familiar. I started thinking maybe I'd just been caught up in the excitement of something new. I do that a lot. I'm neurodivergent, and sometimes I get so intensely fixated on things that they consume me for weeks before I suddenly don't care anymore. So I tried to settle. I told myself this is fine. He's wonderful. He's stable. He loves me deeply and consistently. I convinced myself that maybe I didn't need more, that maybe all those cravings for connection and novelty were just distractions pulling me away from what actually mattered. But then October happened. I went to a couple of parties, nothing wild, just small get-togethers. And at both I met someone. Two different people, actually. Both were kind, funny, interesting in ways that felt easy. I didn't go looking for anything, but I found myself clicking with them, talking effortlessly, laughing in that light, airy way I hadn't in a long time. It felt good, too good. I didn't cross any boundaries. We've just been friends since. Because suddenly, all those feelings I'd been pushing down came back. The realization that I like connecting with people, that I like flirting, the little sparks, the different ways love and attraction can exist. I like the variety, the emotional textures, the different types of closeness. And it's not because I'm unsatisfied with my boyfriend. It's because I'm not wired to get everything I need from one person. Because he's the best partner I've ever had. He really is. He's patient, kind, thoughtful, and safe. He's the only person who's ever made me feel secure enough to let my guard down. For the first time in my life, I can picture marriage, growing old with someone, building something stable. When I'm next to him, my anxiety quiets. It's like my body finally understands what safety feels like. And that's what makes this so hard. Because if I walk away from this, or even if I try to open things up again and it ruins us, I don't know how I'd handle it. I've never been good with loss. I have a lot of trauma, and for most of my life, I've been emotionally detached as a way to survive. I haven't really felt sadness or grief properly since I was a teenager. The thought of losing him terrifies me, not just because I love him, but because I honestly don't know who I'd be without him. My world has quietly molded itself around him. My routines, my comfort, my motivation, they all tie back to him somehow. I've become dependent on his presence in ways I didn't mean to. He's the person who grounds me when my brain spirals, who reminds me to eat, to rest, to live. But at the same time, I can feel that spark in me dimming, that restless, curious part of me that wants to connect, to explore, to experience the fullness of who I am. Every time I try to ignore it, it only grows louder. And that's where I'm stuck. Because either way, I won't be fully happy. If I stay monogamous, I'll always wonder what I'm missing, always feel that quiet ache for something I can't have. But if I leave, or if I try to open things again, and it goes wrong, I could lose the only person who's ever made me feel safe, loved, and at peace. And I can't decide which kind of unhappiness I can live with.